My name is Dixie Hibbs, and I'm usually known as a historian, but a lot of my friends know me as the Quilt Lady because I have a weakness or an addiction to quilts. And what I brought today are some samples of quilts that we're going to be displaying in Bardstown on July the 17th and 18th. We haven't had a full-fledged quilt show in Bardstown since 2006. That's when the Old Kentucky Home Festival of Quilts had their last show. But we still have that love and appreciation for quilts. The Bardstown United Methodist Church, the Bardstown Presbyterian Church, and the Episcopal Church of the Ascension have partnered up to have a quilt sharing days. And these are where each of these churches are only a half a block apart in downtown Bardstown, right on the main street. You can park, go to one church, buy a ticket, go in and see 30, 35 quilts in that church on their pews. The churches are showcases as themselves because they were built between 1827 and 1895. If you go into the Episcopal Church, you will see a beautiful Gothic design built in 1895 by the Bardstown Christian Church. They sold it to Episcopalians, and then now, of course, they're occupying the church, and they're spreading their congregation's quilts as well as others across their pews. Now, we think about spreading a quilt across the pew, you're thinking about laying down and covering up. Well, that's not what happens when we do our quilt sharing. We take and fold the quilts, we put them over the pew, across the back, down over the seat, and then right in front of them we don't put anything, so you don't have a fight between a bright red quilt and a bright orange quilt. We don't do that sort of thing. But we know that quilting is a church activity, was a church activity in history, where the quilting groups would use the church, the big rooms, the tables, the space mostly, and of course the ladies of the church would get together and they would create quilts, and they would either wrap them off or they would sell space on them, and then when they were finished, someone got to draw for them, and this was a way of making money for the missions. So that's kind of where we are today. We are trying to raise funds for the church activities. Each of the three churches will share a third in the proceeds. All the money goes to the churches. No money goes out to any administration or any other charitable situation. We want people to come and enjoy the quilts and enjoy the churches. Well, I brought my little quilt show along with you, and I'm going to talk about these quilts a bit. I like to rescue quilts. I don't think I want the title of quilt rescuer, but I like to find a quilt that needs some loving care. And I take and I try to fix it. Most of the time I'm pretty successful. But if I'm not successful, I recut it and make it into a smaller wall hanging or table runner or something like that. But today what I brought you on this quilt, this is a quilt probably from the 1870s and 80s. It's nicely quilted and really an unusual design. But this poor quilt has a lot of problems. This particular fabric here is shattering, as they call it. It's going to pieces. So I have to repair that quilt. And that's the only pattern, only fabric in here that's doing that. So I don't know whether this was used on another piece of clothing before they did this or not. But that is a beautiful quilt, very unusual pattern. Right next to it is a 1930s. Now I bet many of you in my audience have seen or have slept under a quilt like this. This is called Grandmother's Flower Garden. Really nice little pieces. A scrap quilt, but a plan quilt. You notice you have solid gold here and a lighter yellow and then the green. And the same way too. It's planned out for each of the flowers to have coordinating colors. These were made in the 1930s. Many of the quilting ladies and many of the quilts we find today began in the 1930s and 40s. You saved every scrap of material. Times were hard. You didn't have money to go buy new material. So the ladies in the neighborhood would exchange fabrics with you. So you would have enough to have a really colorful, a very diverse fabrics in a quilt. Right in front of this one, this is an 1890s. And I call this my almost charm quilt. Now, almost charm, that sounds rather stupid. But the reality is a charm quilt is a quilt made of pieces only which you use one pattern, only one pattern in each piece. And I'm going to use this as an example. If you see, you've got, these are all different patterns. And it looks like this one and this one are alike, but they're not. This is stars and these are dots. And when I first bought this quilt, I thought, oh, I've got a charm quilt, because all the different patterns. When I laid it out and really looked closely, I realized that there were probably 20 patches in here that had mates on the same thing, that had duplicates. And that was my almost charm quilt. And that's as close to a charm quilt as I've gotten since then. But you see how pretty they are, even when they're folded and laid over a chair like this. And this is the sort of thing you'll be able to look at closely, and you'll be able to touch. We'll let you touch those too. Right in front of this, of all the quilts that I have sewn on, and I have sewn on hundreds, this is the only one I ever made. My sister and I made this quilt together for my mother. We started it in 1979. So it's a young quilt. When I start talking about 1860s and 70s, you're thinking, okay, this is 1979. My mother was very, very pleased with it. She used it on her bed when she had company. We've have exhibited at the different quilt shows. This is called a cathedral window. And you kind of see the stained glass. And for our show, that's kind of appropriate because we talk about the sun coming through the stained glass windows in the churches and how pretty it makes the interior of the church. And then we have these colorful quilts laid across the pews, and it really brightens it up. So my Christine's Cathedral Window quilt will be one of those exhibited in the Methodist Church. This is bright colored just like the cathedral window, but this one is probably 1860s or before, and it's shabby. When we say shabby, that means the fabric is coming apart, the middle is coming out, the batting is coming out of it. But when I bought this quilt, it was filthy dirty. I was afraid it wouldn't even, I wouldn't even put it in my car. I put it in my trunk in a bag. It smelled so bad. But we were able to wash it up. But when we washed it up, we realized it's coming apart. So my job is going to be go back and patch this to actually replace the places that are coming apart. But for an old quilt, a very old quilt, over 150 years old, it's in really good shape. And I know you're thinking, good shape, it's falling apart. The majority of it is not falling apart, and all the tiny pieces, all the points, all of this fabric is in very good shape. This is called pine burr. Pine burr, B-U-R-R. So that's probably the oldest quilt I brought here. This one and these two are very old quilts. Right behind me, you have another one of my family quilts. This is called a Tree of Life. My grandmother Dixie, where I get my name, she was a quilter, and she learned to quilt from her mother, who learned to quilt from her mother. And in 1950s, a lot of the quilters were buying kits. You could buy a kit that had all the fabric, all the pieces in it that you would need to do an applique or a piece quilt, particularly the applique. And you see the pastel colors here? This is a very finely done applique that she was very proud of and that I have inherited. So I'm very pleased about that. Next to it, I brought a fan. It may look like a Dresden plate. It does look like a Dresden plate. But the reality is, it's a fan. You see the fan shapes there. This again is a 1930 quilt. In the 30s again, lots of scrap fabric. These were fabrics that they used to make clothes for children, for adults. They would collect all the little patterns. They would save up maybe a year or two gathering the different fabrics that they would use. This one has issues I'm going to work on and have it finished before the show. Probably rebind it. Nice quilting in it too. When you go to buy a quilt, buy one you really like. Now, you should get one that has lots of quilting, but don't get it just for the quilting. Get it for the pattern or the colors, the things that you like about it, because you'll hang it up and look at it a long time. You should never buy something you don't like, even if it's a good buy, because you'll put it away in your closet or in your chest of drawers and never look at it again. Buy what you like. If it's a good buy, wonderful, brag about it. If you have to pay more for it, still it's a good buy because you like it, and you probably won't find one like it again. Over here in the corner, I'm going to get up because I have to point at it. This was a gift to me. We talked about the Old Kentucky Home Festival of Quilts. In 1991, we started the Festival of Quilts. And it was local ladies together in a committee. We worked very hard, and we invited quilters from all over the country to submit quilts for our show. And they came. They had wonderful quilts. They enjoyed the show. And in 2002, they surprised me at a luncheon with this Sunbonnet Sue quilt. Now, if you can notice, they're all different designs, all different shapes. Here's a patriotic Sunbonnet Sue. The squares were sent out to different quilters. They put their own designs on them, and they sent it back. And one lady out in Kansas, Helen Erickson, put all the squares together. They all have signatures on them of who did it. They lady quilted it all up, and when I went to the luncheon on 2002, they handed me this box. I opened it up, and here was this beautiful big quilt. You can see how big it is here. Here's your Sunbonnet Sue in the desert down here. This one is very special to me. My friend Nancy Miles over in Marion County, Raywick area, St. Francis area, she created this red, white, and blue Sunbonnet Sue image. She has my face applied on it, and she has a lady playing the drum. And I said to her, "Why did you put the drum on there, Nancy?" And she said, "You marched to the tune of a different drummer." And I think what's so ironic is she didn't know that I played the snare drum in the Old Kentucky Home Band for 8 years. So I was a closet drummer, I guess you'd say. She had no idea of that, but the idea that I didn't march to the same beat that everybody else did, and that's what she thought when she made my squares. That means a whole lot to me, as well as all the others. You have Sunbonnet Sue with the umbrella. You have her, as most people see her, you have her reading a book, which is another thing I do a lot of. You have a very elegant one down here in purples and pinks, and the lady who made its name is written on it. So this quilt will be there at our show for you to look at, to get ideas on, and to kind of get an idea, wonder why they did this or did that. This one was made by Marie Patton, who has since passed away over in Chaplin. She embroidered that on there. So it's a memory quilt for me too, on that part. Now, the dates again are July 17th and 18th. That's Saturday and Sunday from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. The church will be open. You'll have the opportunity to buy your ticket at the door of any of the 3 churches you go in. You can buy a ticket. It'll be good at all 3. We're going to serve refreshments. We're going to serve drinks and desserts at the Bardstown Methodist Church Community Room. And in there, we are having a slideshow of the pictures from the Old Kentucky Home Festival of Quilts. We have photographs that were left when we stopped having them. So we put them together in a slideshow where you can stop, take a little rest, have some lemonade or some water, maybe a piece of cake or something, and then you can watch the different patterns go through. So if you can't get enough of quilts by walking around and seeing the churches, come to the community room at the Methodist Church and get another 40 or 50 on the slideshows. My name is Dixie Hibbs. My phone number is 502-507-0808. I want to invite you to come to Bardstown and let us share our quilts with you on Quilt Sharing Days, July 17th and 18th, a week from this coming Friday. If you have any questions, please call me. And if you come to visit and you think you see a lady who looks like me, come up and say hello to me. And again, thank Channel 6 and Gary White for letting me come and visit you tonight.